Cool. Well, what's up, freedom fighters? I'm Jinsella from deD Education, and I am here with independent journalist, political commentator, and analyst, the one and only Richard Medhurst. Richard, I want to thank you for your ruthless pursuit of truth. We are at an insane moment in history, a moment of deep exposure, and we're experiencing an unprecedented collapse of institutional trust. Free Assange, free Palestine, free Congo, free Yemen, free the student protesters, free all of us from this miserable system. So, as someone with a distinct voice in independent media, how does the decision made today at the Royal Court of Justice impact humanity's interconnected fight for freedom?
Thank you for the grand introduction, and it's really great to be on the stream and to speak with you. And I'm very disappointed generally by this whole case. It should never be happening in the first place. We should really be clear on that. This entire case should have never even begun. Julian Assange is a gem. He's a national treasure. We must protect him at all costs, and we must do whatever we can to stop extradition and to alleviate all of the suffering that this has caused, if we can even make up for it, because it's gone on for so long now, this persecution. Now, I really want to impress upon the audience the absurdity of this whole trial, because the Americans, they've been given all these chances to redo the case, and it's like the British justice system is just allowing them to file not one, but two, but three indictments. And then they can also go on and have multiple sets of assurances. And I've done a lot of work on these assurances because the whole case hinges on the assurances. We already know the CIA want to kill Julian Assange. It's kind of obvious. But the technicality of the whole case is, can we trust the Americans? Can we trust them as a country to really, abide by their word, to fulfill what they have outlined? Now, a diplomatic note is not a contract. We have to be clear on that. It's not a contract. So any country sending a diplomatic note, you can't really enforce it in a court. And then on top of that, when the Americans have been giving contracts, they don't abide by them. And I did a lot of work on that on the David Mendoza case, because it's a perfect one-to-one comparison. Both of them are being extradited by the same power, by the US, both from countries that are part of the European Council. And David Mendoza didn't even have the political target that Julian has on his back, and so he was still robbed of a family life, of being close to his family, of his human rights being respected, and of course, in addition to that, he had to fight tooth and nail just to have the Americans fulfill the conditions of his extradition, and that was a legally binding contract, and they still broke it. So we can't expect them to do anything that they tell the British judges today or yesterday or last year even. Since the moment the assurances came in, they were untrustworthy. There's always these weasel words and loopholes inside of them. So I'm just upset that the court they're not just insulting Julian, they're insulting the entire country by allowing the Americans to come into the court and talk to us like this. Because we should remember that the judiciary is acting on our behalf, supposedly, right? So when we have the Americans coming in and saying, well, we will allow him to raise the First Amendment at trial, instead of saying we will give him First Amendment rights, just like we're prosecuting him under US law, he's allowed those protections under US law. Well, then the judges are allowing the Americans to walk all over us. And so I don't have high hopes for anything that the justice system is doing.
Wow. It's an embarrassment. It is an embarrassment, the way that citizens all across the world are held under such harsh rules, such harsh enforcement of law, and then our institutions just manage to jump over them as soon as an ally says, yeah, not me, don't apply it to me, or even our government themselves. It's embarrassing. We saw it as well with arms sales right now going to Israel. We saw it since 2017 with arms sales going to Saudi Arabia. They're breaking the law and they're changing precedent so that they can continue to get away with this nonsense. So how does this really impact the decision made today really impact the interconnected fight for freedom?
Well, it's everything. Like I was saying, Julian Assange is a national treasure. He's a symbol of what it means to be a journalist. Journalism journalists are supposed to be the watchdogs of democracy. So if we have obscene rank government crimes like this being committed, and then the one who exposes the crimes goes to jail, by the way, just like David McBride, who is not a journalist but a whistleblower. Also, the same principle though. He exposes government crimes and he's sent to jail in Australia. I mean, it's absurd, and so this impacts us very negatively because right now we have a very beautiful movement going on around the world. It's been elevated to a new status now with all these student protests coming to life. We have new life being, essentially these students are breathing life into the movement right now for peace and justice and for human rights and international law to be respected. We're not asking much. So the decision by the court is everything, because if they're allowed to do this to Julian Assange, they can do it to anyone. And the fact this has been going on for 10 years is bad enough. Now, if the court decide to allow the trial to go ahead, it's a double-edged sword, because yes, there will be a full appeal hearing. He can go on and contest the assurances, but it's like we haven't moved on since 2021 or 2022. And all the while he's still in prison, So as long as he is in a jail cell, we are losing, and Julian is losing first and foremost. And their whole game is to keep him in prison as long as possible, is to kill him, God forbid, whether it's in England or in America. So the pressure that we are applying on the court just by protesting, by people coming out, is quintessential to making clear to the judges not just what we want, but to remind them not to abdicate their duties to us, right? So it's very important that the court decide the right way. They should throw the whole case out. They have a myriad of reasons to do so. There's no difficulty in choosing. And if they don't do it now, well, then the European court will humiliate them, and they will. I mean, this is bad for their careers anyway. I'm trying to appeal to their reason, perhaps in a more selfish manner, and tell them that if they decide to extradite Julian and essentially deal a massive blow to our movement, well, the European Court of Human Rights is likely to just humiliate these judges by saying, well, you were wrong here, here, and here, and here. You capitulated to the Americans. You abdicated your duty towards British people, and you put journalism and democracy at risk by sending someone to a dungeon in America.
Thank you. It's really outstanding the way they are just openly getting away with torturing a journalist. And you are in a very unique position where you have actually been inside the courtroom and listening and following the decisions to a very, very close detail. Now, I'm wondering if you can explain to me why and what it actually means for the US to be applying extraterritorial jurisdiction.
Well, it's certainly a manner of witnessing history, but in a very bad way, because I'd rather not be in the courtroom and there'd be no case whatsoever against Julian, right? So just so we're clear on that, because the fact that it's happening is very, very bad, and it's not exactly pleasant to see a bunch of lawyers a few meters away from you, standing there and pontificating about how valiant they are in persecuting someone who's exposed their bosses as big, mass murderers. I mean, it's insulting. It really is insulting. And this extraterritorialization, it is a form of imperialism manifesting, right? So they can find all bunch of all manner of laws and weasel words to make it look like it's legal, but it's not legal. And we are the ones that are actually looking at the law and saying you're wrong on all of these counts. It's mesmerizing. How much you have violated Julian's rights, his right to a fair trial, his right to legal counsel without being spied on, his right to not be tortured, his right to life and liberty. They're violating everything, even the extradition treaty, which is the whole basis for this case. They have violated it, and they continue to violate it. And it's like an elephant walking in and trampling on everybody. That's the figurative, the analogy I'll give you about what the Americans are doing, and it's a shame because the the lawmakers that we have in England, the MPs, I feel they purposely left out the exception to political extraditions. Of course, because they drafted this in 2002. They were getting the war on Iraq ready, and the war on terror was already going, and they just wanted to bend over backwards to do everything what the Americans want, and allow them to ship out as many Britons as needed over to America and torture them in Guantanamo Bay and elsewhere. So they left out this exception on purpose, and it doesn't make any sense from a legal viewpoint that the treaty says no political extraditions, which applies to Julian because it's espionage, supposedly espionage, and then inside the application under British law, the act itself, the Extradition Act, it's missing. What is that? I mean, and even then, by the way, just so we're clear, even then, you can still find a myriad of things that would preclude Julian from extradition, and his lawyers have done obviously a very good job at doing that. It's just that judges don't want to listen to it. The health reasons, for example, which was why the extradition was blocked in the first place. But again, I can sit here and go through all the reasons, and I'm more than happy to. I really am, because I want to educate people and open their eyes to it. But the point is, to answer your question, the Americans do not care. They don't care about following the law. They make a mockery of the treaty itself, of their own laws in in the United States, and also in Britain. So we're not dealing with rational actors in this case. We're dealing with thugs. I have to say it like this, because what Julian exposed, I mean, some of the things in these files, I can't even say them out loud because of how awful they are. People that have been tortured by the United States have gone to the European Court of Human Rights and actually proven that they were tortured thanks to Julian. And they've gotten compensation because of that, if we can call it compensation. But nevertheless, they were able to prove it in a court of law thanks to Julian. And they suffered horrific abuse and torture under the United States and the CIA. And so to have lawyers, an army of lawyers being sent in to represent those murderers, those torturers, those killers, those bloodthirsty killers who have murdered and turned into refugees millions of people in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and elsewhere. It is so insulting to Julian, to the country, and also to the victims themselves. It really is. And at one point, I should just remind everyone that we had Khaled al-Masri, who was going to testify in the court, and magically, mysteriously, in a first world country, the internet doesn't work, and he can't speak to the court directly about how he was tortured by the CIA. But okay.
Wow. Why do you think it is that British judges and the American thuggish regime and the UK as their guard dog, shall we say, are so afraid of the release of Julian Assange?
Well, because first of all, they want to punish him. So this is really just a vindictive act. And if they release him, well, they can't punish him anymore. They'll find other ways. I'm sure they're very creative. But if they release him, well, it sets a precedent, so to speak. It sounds like a negative thing, but it sets a precedent that other journalists will not have to suffer the same fate should they embarrass or should they reveal government crimes and state criminality. And so that's why they don't want to release him, because they want to make sure this can never happen again, that all of the dirty laundry is held up in public for everyone to see, all their crimes that they've carried out abroad in their wars. They want to make sure it can't happen again. They want to make sure that it's a legal precedent to slap and abuse and torture and spy on anyone who dares to challenge them, and actually uphold democracy by being a watchdog and holding the government to account. So that's why they're afraid of releasing Julian. And this is, as you point out, it's a bipartisan, binational effort between the uni state in Britain and the uni state in America. So it's another manifestation of empire. We have it's a big boys club who want to make sure that their friends, their colleagues, their family don't fall into the same embarrassment in the future. And so that's why they don't want to release him. That's why they're afraid.
Thank you. Now, Julian Assange has really set the stage for a whole generation of truth seekers. And shout out to everyone here watching that is cutting through the propaganda smoke. But there is a lot at risk today. And if the unfavorable decision is made, those truth seekers, and I'm talking to you again, will be needed more than ever. Do you have a message for the world about why Assange's pursuit of truth must be, and how it can be, upheld?
Well, my message to everyone is direct action is very effective. You can see right now at the student protests, why all this violence by the police? What is the point of sending in riot police to attack students? Why would you do this? What is the logic behind this? Well, it's because it's effective. The protests are effective. The encampments are effective, and this is just as true of the Assange movement. Coming out and protesting in front of the court, fighting for principles like freedom, like liberty, like truth, like justice, democracy. These things matter. They actually, you are the manifestation of that by coming out and making your voices heard. They hate it. They really hate it. And this is why, by the way, they've tried on multiple occasions to put the courtroom all in the back of, in the Old Bailey, they did this where you would go up like 6 flights of stairs and then you have to walk to the end of the corridor, and then the courtroom was there, so you can't hear the protests outside. So the judges are aware of this. They don't like it. They're not very fond of democracy, unfortunately. It's because it's effective. And I can also tell you that the police in England, for example, the London Metropolitan, they spy on people who go to protests. And I don't mean this to dissuade people. On the contrary, they should be ashamed of themselves for doing that. They should be ashamed of themselves for trying to threaten citizens who just want to exercise their right to protest. I think that's shameful. And trying to intimidate them, essentially, out of coming out and being a voice for truth and being a voice for justice. Julian Assange, as I said, is a national treasure. He's a gem. We have to protect him. He really is not just a wonderful human being and someone who sacrificed his life to give us the truth, but he's a symbol of resistance. He is a symbol of resistance. We have to understand this, and we have to understand the value of what he has done, and done for all of us, and done for the victims of imperialism. He is a symbol of resistance. We have to resist to help him. Remember what he said when he was being dragged out of the embassy and manhandled. He said, "UK resist." He said those words, "UK resist." And so we have to oblige him, come out, make our voices heard, engage in direct action, open up other people's eyes, make them see reason, make them see truth. And this is how it's simply when you tell people what's happening to Julian, it is so absurd, it is so outrageous, you can't help but win them over. And so that is resistance. That is what he is asking of you. And really, I only hope that for the best for him, and I hope that this whole ridiculous case is thrown out, because it's the recent ruling we had, for example, in March, is insulting. I mean, they said, for example, that if he's extradited, there is no reason to spy on him or to kill him or to poison him or to kidnap him. Well, yes, that's quite obvious. That's the point of the extradition. It's to get him to America where they can do those things. I don't know why the judges even thought of this, let alone wrote it, but they did that. They actually wrote this, and I find this is so revealing and telling of what we're up against. It's madness. It's something out of a Twilight Zone episode. And so having all of the 9, so out of the reasons that his lawyers applied for, I think they left 4, 5, and 9 in on the grounds of appeal, and it's like we're going through the most basic things. We're going through the most basic things that it's a violation of his free speech, right, under Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights. It's a violation also of not just British and European law, but also American law, that he would be prejudiced at trial, that he would have no First Amendment rights. And then also that the United States could pile on new charges, right, and give him the death penalty even. So there's the rule of specialty being violated, and also, of course, his English law bars extradition to countries that give people that are extradited death penalty. So we have so many things here that should clearly preclude Julian from being extradited. Just these 3 reasons alone. So normally the judges should be able to block the extradition. Julian's team should win, even with just these 3 reasons, because it's so obvious, because it's so clear, because we'd have Donald Trump and Mike Pompeo and so many US officials openly saying on camera that they want to kill Julian, that they want to imprison him, that they want to deprive him of life and liberty, on record, documented. So they have every reason, moral and legal, to throw this case out. They must throw the case out, and we must keep making our voices heard and educating people so they do that.
Hell yeah, amen to that. You heard Richard. Freedom fighters, get up, stand up, come to the royal courts of justice, be there in person. If you can't watch online, spread the word. This is a fight not just for the freedom of Assange, but the freedom of all people.
Yes.
It really is ironic that the Iraq operation to instill democracy is just now at such a facade, and the way that our democracy is actually being run and the elite pursuit of democracy is a complete lie.
Yeah.
It really does give some gravel to the amount of people that died in the name of democracy when we can't even uphold our own democracies. Do you have anything to say on that?
It's so hypocritical, and this whole, like, the names of the operations, it's so CIA, it's so boring and typical, like Operation Iraqi Freedom. Like, who comes up with these things? It's like they're so desperate to get across their branding that they make fools of themselves, and of course, it would be comical were it not so tragic. And Julian Assange is just as much a victim as someone who's been killed in Iraq by the Americans, absolutely, without question. He is a martyr for this cause. He is a martyr for both our right to democracy in Britain and, of course, the Iraqis' right to just be left alone. They're free to choose whatever method of government they want. And I should just point out that after we invaded Iraq and we supposedly gave them democracy, the Iraqi parliament voted to kick out all foreign troops. And we don't listen. We don't listen to them. We don't respect their democracy, right? So it's really so telling. It's so telling. The elites actually despise democracy. They despise journalists. They despise truth tellers. They are the enemies of democracy. They really are. And I'm not saying that because I like to say the word democracy 50 million times like they do, but just to point out their hypocrisy. They on every level of what are supposed to be democratic institutions, a free press, a free judiciary, they violate, they abuse, they lie on all of these and in all of these domains constantly, both domestically and also abroad. And we really owe it to the victims of this war in Iraq, who have never recovered. You have people to this day in Iraq who are suffering from horrific birth defects. I mean, for example, Fallujah, where the Americans used depleted uranium shells. These are better for armor piercing. There was no armored battle there. I don't even know what they were firing at that would warrant the use of such ordnance, but they used it anyway. They used white phosphorus. And so you have children being born to this day in Iraq from a battle that happened 20 years ago with more birth defects than in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So, this has caused enormous suffering to the people of Iraq, enormous damage to the environment. We have to talk about these things. And this is just what we know, already on the surface. Julian went and the extra mile and put out stuff that we hadn't heard of. And then we learned about 15,000 additional dead in Iraq, who it's like 15,000 people. I mean, how awful that we didn't even know of their existence, of their death, of anything. These